In the dim glow of Mar-a-Lago's war room on the morning after Zohran Mamdani's stunning victory in the New York City mayoral race, President Donald Trump's inner circle, huddled around a mahogany table littered with half-eaten Big Macs and stacks of briefing memos, the air thick with the scent of stale coffee and simmering rage, as the 34-year-old Democratic Socialists win, securing 54% of the vote against Andrew Cuomo's independent bid and Curtis Sliwa's Republican longshot, rippled like a shockwave through the nation's political fault lines, marking not just the election of the city's first Muslim and South Asian mayor, but a direct affront to the MAGA machine that had poured millions into Cuomo's coffers under Trump's personal endorsement, a defeat that stung deeper than the off-year Democratic sweeps in New Jersey and Virginia, where Governors Mickey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger capitalized on affordability crusades to deliver body blows to Republican strongholds. Trump's four-word Truth Social post at 2:17 a.m. Eastern, "And so it begins," hung in the humid Florida air like a gauntlet thrown, a cryptic vow that his team interpreted as the opening salvo in a multifaceted retaliation strategy designed to choke the life out of Mamdani's progressive agenda before it could even take root in City Hall, with senior advisor Stephen Miller pacing the room, his voice a low growl as he sketched out on a whiteboard the first prong, a federal funding freeze targeting New York's sanctuary city policies which Mamdani had championed during his assembly tenure, arguing that the influx of over 100,000 migrants since 2022 had strained resources but also enriched the city's cultural fabric, a narrative Trump dismissed as open border insanity in a Fox News hit that morning, vowing to slash the $7 billion in annual Homeland Security grants unless Mamdani reversed course on what he called inviting chaos into America's beating heart. As dawn broke over the Hudson, Trump's communications director, Caroline Leavitt, fired off a press release branding Mamdani a radical socialist puppet whose victory speech, delivered to a roaring Brooklyn crowd where he taunted Trump directly, saying, "To get to any of us, you will have to go through New York," was a dangerous declaration of war on working Americans, setting the tone for a media blitz that would flood cable news with cherry-picked clips of Mamdani's past DSA affiliations, including his calls for rent freezes and police defunding, framing them not as bold reforms, but as harbingers of economic collapse, with Trump himself dialing into Sean Hannity's show from his gold-plated phone, his voice gravelly with feigned concern as he predicted, "New Yorkers will flee this communism faster than rats from a sinking ship. Miami's waiting with open arms," a line that elicited chuckles from his aides, but masked a deeper calculus, leveraging the win as red meat for the base, ahead of 2026 midterms, where suburban swing voters in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin could be swayed by tales of urban decay under Mamdani's madness. By midday, the machinery whirred to life, with House Speaker Mike Johnson convening an emergency GOP caucus on Capitol Hill to draft legislation dubbed the Urban Sanity Act, a bill aimed at clawing back $2 billion in HUD housing subsidies unless cities like New York complied with stricter immigration vetting, a move Miller described in a closed-door briefing as turning the screws without breaking the pipe, ensuring that Mamdani's promised relentless improvement on affordability, vowing to cap rents at pre-2020 levels and expand free childcare, would wither under bureaucratic strangulation, while Trump's Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, quietly instructed IRS auditors to scrutinize nonprofit donors fueling Mamdani's volunteer army of 50,000, many of them young progressives who'd shattered turnout records with 735,000 early votes, a surge Trump attributed not to genuine enthusiasm but to ballot harvesting scams, in a tweet storm that racked up 10 million views before lunch. Across town, in a nondescript K Street office, Trump's legal eagles, led by alumni from his impeachment defenses, pored over municipal bond disclosures, hunting for leverage points in New York's $100 billion debt load to threaten credit downgrades if Mamdani pursued his Green New York plan for carbon-neutral transit by 2030, a vision that included electrifying the entire subway system and subsidizing e-bikes for low-income riders, initiatives Trump derided as eco-fantasies that will bankrupt the Big Apple, directing his EPA appointees to preemptively withhold clean air grants and impose punitive emissions tariffs on city fleets, a tactic borrowed from his first-term playbook against blue state holdouts. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows over Trump Tower's empty penthouse, where the president had once reigned supreme, Mamdani's transition team, holed up in a Queens community center, fielded frantic calls from alarmed council members, unaware that Trump's data wizards at Cambridge Analytica's spiritual successor were already mining voter rolls to identify soft Democratic donors for targeted harassment campaigns, emails laced with warnings of socialist overreach, flooding inboxes. From Wall Street to Williamsburg, while in the Oval Office, Trump leaned back in his leather chair, swirling a Diet Coke, and murmured to Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, "This kid thinks he can play my game. Watch me flip the board." His eyes gleaming with the predatory focus of a man who'd turned electoral losses into launches pads before, convinced that Mamdani's historic triumph, built on a coalition of Gen Z firebrands, immigrant families, and disaffected Black and Latino voters who'd flipped the Bronx by 15 points, was less a mandate than a mirage ripe for shattering through unrelenting federal pressure. The afternoon brought the first tangible jab, a White House memo to the Justice Department authorizing probes into alleged electoral irregularities in Mamdani's precincts, with Attorney General Pam Bondi dispatching FBI agents to canvass turnout spikes in Astoria and Bushwick, where Mamdani's Ugandan-born heritage and unapologetic advocacy for Palestinian rights had galvanized Muslim communities long sidelined by mainstream Democrats. A probe Trump teased on social media as cleaning up the steel before it spreads, igniting protests outside federal buildings as Mamdani's supporters chanted, "Hands off our city," their voices echoing off granite facades in a prelude to the clashes sure to define the months ahead. By evening, as Trump's motorcade snaked through Miami's neon-lit streets for a rally billed as America's Real Fight Back, the president's rhetoric escalated, painting Mamdani not as a reformer, but a foreign-influenced agitator whose policies would hand the keys to globalists, a slur echoing far-right X threads accusing the mayor-elect of DSA ties to shadowy billionaires, though evidence pointed instead to grassroots funding from teachers' unions and gig workers tired of $4,000 a month. Studios, with Trump pausing mid-speech to thunder, "We'll make New York great again," without him, the crowd erupting in chants that drowned out the distant sirens of a city already bracing for the storm, one where Trump's team, sensing blood in the water, plotted not just survival, but supremacy, turning Mamdani's beacon of hope into a cautionary tale of progressive peril. Deep within the labyrinthine corridors of the Federal Reserve's satellite offices in Lower Manhattan, whispers of an impending squeeze echoed like footsteps in an empty vault as Trump's economic enforcers, handpicked from the Heritage Foundation's policy mills, began orchestrating a shadow war against Zohran Mamdani's nascent administration, their fingers hovering over keyboards that controlled the flow of $15 billion in annual federal aid to New York City, a lifeline now weaponized in a bid to force concessions on everything from tax hikes on the ultra-wealthy to universal pre-K expansion, with Treasury operatives leaking projections to Bloomberg terminals, forecasting a 20% spike in municipal borrowing costs if Mamdani dared implement his people's budget, a blueprint that redirected funds from luxury zoning variances toward 100,000 units of truly affordable housing, a dream born from the eviction crises that had displaced 50,000 families since the pandemic. Families Mamdani had met door to door in the rain-slicked streets of the South Bronx, listening to tales of grandparents priced out after decades of loyalty to a city that forgot them. Trump's response, unveiled in a rose garden presser flanked by charts graphing socialist spirals in Venezuela and San Francisco, was to announce the America First Cities Initiative, an executive order tasking Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick with auditing urban grants for ideological bias, effectively greenlighting denials for Mamdani's signature proposals like a $20 minimum wage for fast food chains and free community college, measures that had propelled his primary upset over Cuomo by mobilizing 200,000 first-time voters under 30, a demographic Trump lambasted as entitled snowflakes in a rally-side rant, his face flushed under Klieg lights as he gestured wildly at a jumbotron replaying Mamdani's victory address, where the mayor-elect had pledged to turn the volume up on resistance to federal overreach, a phrase that now served as fodder for a $50 million super PAC ad buy, orchestrated by Elon Musk's dark money network, spots flooding YouTube and TikTok with doctored footage splicing Mamdani's pro-Palestine marches with clips of urban riots, narrating in ominous tones how this is what happens when radicals run the room, a narrative amplified by a cadre of Trump-aligned influencers who descended on X like digital locusts, their threads dissecting Mamdani's immigrant roots, born to Ugandan parents who fled Idi Amin's terror, as proof of divided loyalties, ignoring the irony that Trump's own grandparents hailed from similar diasporas, a hypocrisy laid bare in counterposts from Mamdani's digital army but drowned in the algorithmic tide. As night fell over the Capitol, Senate Majority Leader John Thune huddled with Finance Committee staffers in a smoke-filled anteroom, drafting amendments to the upcoming infrastructure bill that would tie New York's $4 billion slice to fiscal responsibility pacts, code for vetoing Mamdani's plan to claw back $1 billion from tax breaks for hedge funds that had ballooned CEO pay while subway delays averaged 45 minutes per commute. Commuters Mamdani vowed to liberate through a public bank, modeled on North Dakota's, an idea Trump branded government takeover light, in a blistering op-ed ghostwritten by Newt Gingrich for the Wall Street Journal, warning of capital flight that would leave Wall Street a ghost town, though economists at the Urban Institute countered with data showing Mamdani's policies could inject $10 billion into local economies via multiplier effects from stabilized rents and bolstered small businesses, a rebuttal dismissed by Trump's press secretary as ivory tower drivel during a briefing where she unveiled leaked emails from Mamdani's campaign allegedly coordinating with anti-Israel agitators, a smear timed to exploit tensions in Jewish communities, where Mamdani's 40% support masked deep rifts over his ceasefire advocacy, rifts Trump exploited by hosting a solidarity summit at the White House with AI-PAC donors, pledging an extra $500 million in security aid to offset what he called Mamdani's divisive rhetoric, a gesture that masked a broader ploy to peel moderate Democrats from the mayor's coalition through targeted outreach to older voters who'd backed Cuomo by 10 points in exit polls. Meanwhile, in the bowels of Fox News headquarters, producers scripted a week-long series titled NYC's Red Dawn, featuring nightly segments with ex-NYPD commissioners decrying Mamdani's community policing reforms as defund 2.0, reforms that aim to reallocate $300 million from overtime bloat to mental health crisis teams, a shift informed by Mamdani's own encounters with over-policed neighborhoods during his organizer days, but twisted by Trump's surrogates into visions of lawless streets where crime waves crash unchecked, even as preliminary stats showed a 12% homicide drop in pilot districts, data buried under avalanches of anecdotal horror stories curated from tip lines flooded by incentivized callers. By week's end, as Mamdani's transition co-chairs, veteran activists like Bharti Kamra and labor leader Maria Torres convened focus groups in Harlem basements to map out implementation timelines. Trump's FCC chair moved to throttle Spectrum licenses for progressive podcasts amplifying the mayor's vision, citing national security risks in a filing that chilled free speech advocates, while in quiet boardrooms at Goldman Sachs, executives who'd bankrolled Cuomo's super PAC now lobbied for preemptive lawsuits challenging Mamdani's corporate tax surcharges, suits bankrolled by Trump's Small Business Council to portray the mayor as anti-growth, a portrayal clashing with endorsements from 200 union locals who'd turned out en masse, their members, plumbers, teachers, nurses, seeing in Mamdani a fighter against the gig economy's grind that had left 40% of households one paycheck from eviction. As the chapter of this feud unfolded, Trump's team reveled in the chaos, with Jared Kushner dispatching emissaries to Albany to court moderate state Dems for veto-proof overrides on Mamdani's local ordinances, a divide-and-conquer play that exposed fractures in the progressive flank. Yet Mamdani, undeterred, leaked his own counter-strategy, a resilience fund crowdfunded via blockchain to bypass federal strings, drawing $20 million in 48 hours from Silicon Valley allies wary of Trump's tech. Tariffs, a move that prompted a midnight tweet from the president, fake money for fake mayor, but signaled the opening of a guerrilla fiscal front where dollars became the new battleground, pitting Wall Street's iron grip against a tide of micro-donations from baristas and artists dreaming of a city reclaimed for its people. Under the vaulted ceilings of a Georgetown salon repurposed as a strategy bunker, Trump's veteran operatives, ghosts from the 2016 war room like Corey Lewandowski and Roger Stone, sipped bourbon neat while poring over swing state maps projected on smart walls, their eyes narrowing on districts where Mamdani's upset had ignited copycat campaigns among DSA upstarts in Philadelphia and Detroit, cities Trump now targeted with a Patriot Protection Tour of town halls designed to inoculate the heartland against what he dubbed Mamdani-ism's creeping vine, a term coined in a viral memo circulated to GOP governors, urging them to preempt local rent controls with state-level bans modeled on Florida's, where DeSantis had slashed tenant protections by 30% amid a housing boom that enriched developers but left 200,000 families couch-surfing, a disparity Mamdani highlighted in a viral thread linking Trump's donor class to the profiteering, drawing 5 million engagements and forcing the president's rapid response team into overdrive with counter-memes depicting the mayor as a taxman in a keffiyeh, Islamophobic jabs that backfired among suburban moms in Bucks County, where polls showed a 7-point shift toward Democratic challengers preaching Mamdani's affordability gospel. As autumn leaves swirled outside, Trump's ambassador corps fanned out to NATO allies, whispering of destabilized urban labs under progressive rule to justify a 15% cut in foreign aid pass-throughs to U.S. cities, a diplomatic feint that hit Mamdani's internationalist streak, his pledges for sister city pacts with progressive havens like Barcelona, squarely, prompting the mayor-elect to host a global summit on climate justice in Central Park, attended by 100,000 despite drizzle, where he unveiled partnerships with EU mayors to fund green retrofits bypassing Washington, a bold stroke that irked Trump's State Department into revoking visas for key attendees on spurious security grounds, escalating the feud into transatlantic headlines that portrayed America as a house divided, with editorials in Le Monde hailing Mamdani as the anti-Trump, while Trump's UN envoy Nikki Haley thundered about unilateral sabotage in Security Council sidebars. Back home in the fluorescent hum of RNC headquarters, data scientists cross-referenced Mamdani's voter files with 2024 turnout dips, identifying 2 million low-propensity conservatives in metro areas ripe for mobilization via mailers, warning of mandatory socialism under expanded Medicare for all pilots, a specter Trump amplified in a primetime address from the White House, his tie loosened just so as he leaned into the camera, voice dropping to that trademark gravel. Zoran's experiment will fail, and when it does, we'll rebuild stronger, without the radicals. A prophecy laced with empathy for forgotten New Yorkers who'd voted Cuomo in precincts where Mamdani scraped by with 48%. Older white ethnics in Staten Island and Bay Ridge who feared his reforms as cultural erasure, fears stoked by Trump's focus groups, yielding ads featuring tearful grandmothers lamenting lost neighborhoods to outsider agendas, though Mamdani countered with multilingual town halls in Yiddish and Arabic, bridging divides with stories of his own family's flight from persecution, forging unlikely bonds that peeled 5% from GOP rolls in Brooklyn hybrids. As winter loomed, Trump's judicial network activated, with Federalist Society clerks fast-tracking appeals against Mamdani's executive orders on gig worker classifications, rulings from Trump-appointed judges in the Second Circuit that could kneecap union drives for 500,000 DoorDashers and Uber drivers, a class Mamdani elevated as the backbone of our invisible economy, their testimonials fueling his podcast circuit where he dissected Trump's playbook as divide to conquer, amassing 10 million downloads and spawning imitators in Atlanta and Minneapolis, cities where Trump's team retaliated by flooding local airwaves with deepfake audio of Mamdani endorsing open borders for all, fakes debunked by fact-checkers, but lingering in echo chambers that boosted Republican registrations by 8% in red-leaning suburbs. In a twist that blindsided even Stone, Mamdani's outreach to disgruntled Trump voters, blue-collar vets in Queens who'd soured on endless wars, unveiled a common ground caucus with cross-aisle council reps, yielding bipartisan wins on pothole fixes and veteran hiring quotas, concessions Trump spun as stolen thunder in a Mar-a-Lago briefing, directing his super PACs to unearth donor scandals from Mamdani's assembly days, minor ethics hiccups inflated into pay-to-play exposés that fizzled under scrutiny but sowed doubt among establishment Dems wary of his DSA purity tests. By spring's thaw, as Mamdani's first 100 days dawned with ribbon cuttings on new public pools in the Rockaways, Trump's endgame crystallized in a national security directive framing urban progressivism as a hybrid threat, empowering DHS to surveil activist networks under expanded FISA warrants, a draconian overreach that sparked lawsuits from the ACLU and drew Mamdani into Oval Office talks brokered by Pelosi holdovers, where he extended an olive branch, dialogue over destruction, only for Trump to counter with a photo-op handshake, followed by leaked transcripts twisting his words into concessions, a sleight of hand that preserved MAGA cred while buying time for midterm ground games. Yet in the quiet hours after deal-making, as aides debriefed in dimly lit diners, whispers grew of fractures in Trump's phalanx. Miller clashing with moderates over the optics of starving school lunches in immigrant-heavy districts, a misstep that handed Mamdani viral gold in videos of kids with empty trays captioned, "This is Trump's America," shifting independence by 4 points in battlegrounds and forcing a tactical pivot toward cultural wedge issues like school curricula on gender, where Trump's DOE mandated parental rights audits that Mamdani defied with opt-in opt-outs, igniting parent-teacher wars that played out in PTA meetings turned battlegrounds, each side claiming the mantle of family values amid a city pulsing with the raw energy of change resisted but not quelled. Ultimately, as the first anniversary of the win approached, Trump's team stood at a crossroads, their siege yielding grudging respect from a mayor who'd outmaneuvered the machine, his approval hovering at 58% on affordability metrics, while Trump's national numbers dipped to 42%, a mirror reflecting not just policy clashes, but a deeper schism in the American soul, where Mamdani's unyielding optimism clashed against Trump's fortress mentality, promising a saga far from over, with each move a chess piece in a game where the board spanned boroughs to beltways, and the stakes were nothing less than the Republic's reinvention.